right, welcome to another Insider Notebook here at Bleacher Report. I'm James Palmer here with you once again. Remember, 2 o'clock Eastern every single Tuesday. A couple technical difficulties, a couple minutes behind. That's all right. We'll go a couple minutes long. We have a lot to get to. Yes, the season is behind us. Yes, we have a Super Bowl champion of number 60, the Seattle Seahawks, but that does not stop the NFL calendar, right? We're going to get into what this offseason now has ahead for us and some things to look at in terms of some quarterback shuffling, Maxx Crosby, a lot of different things to get to. We have Max right there at the top. I want to mention this, that Clint Kubiak's introductory press conference, I've been actually watching it here on the computer as I've been waiting to get this thing going, is going on right now. Obviously, Clint is going to be asked about Maxx Crosby. I'll get that information out on this stream as quickly as I can because we have some people monitoring it. But we'll start off with Maxx Crosby and potential landing spots if he does depart the Las Vegas Raiders. Also, what's next for the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks with all the free agents that they have? They have to replace Clint Kubiak. What's next for them? What's next for Kirk Cousins? Did some digging on that this morning. Potential landing spots for the quarterback there. Also, Kyler Murray. What's his future in Arizona or elsewhere? Also, Russell Wilson. A lot of quarterback talk here in this one, but that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about throughout the course of this offseason, so why not get it going right now? And then also Travis Kelce. Where does his future stand? Talked to some people in Kansas City actually this morning. So we'll start with Maxx Crosby and where things stand with him right now. He took the high road, didn't really say anything, even though there were some reports during Super Bowl week from various outlets and various insiders that his time in Vegas is over. Let's kind of set that up, and then we'll get into exactly where he could potentially land. You have to remember that Max is about as loyal to this organization as you see in any player in the modern NFL right now. He loves being a Raider. He loves Mark Davis. I think the feeling is very mutual. He takes a lot of pride in being a Las Vegas Raider. But again, he's been through a lot. He has only played in one playoff game. He's been through a lot of change. And that's why everybody starts to now connect the dots to what happened at the end of this season, which is essentially the injury. He had the injury October 19th against the Chiefs. He ends up sustaining that knee injury in typical Maxx Crosby fashion. He plays through the pain throughout the course of the year. He gets additional scans on, I believe, December 23rd that says that, yes, he is going to need surgery, but he gets multiple opinions to see if he can keep playing. This is where kind of the vision of this from two different angles is where we have a bit of the impasse, because John Spytek, Tom Brady, Alex Guerrero, the old ownership group, essentially wants him to shut it down at the end of the season. Maxx Crosby, being who he is, obviously does not want to shut it down. He gets two more opinions. Both of those doctors tell him that it would be okay to keep playing and he can have the surgery when the season is over. They still stick to their guns, ownership side, and tell him they want to shut him down. Obviously, Maxx Crosby doesn't take that to heart very well. There is a bit of an argument about that. We'll see how they mend the fences between the two sides, because Crosby obviously wants to be on the field, takes a ton of pride in being there each and every week for his team. Obviously, they sat down Brock Bowers as well, who was battling a separate knee injury throughout the course of the season. There is speculation that the Raiders wanted the number one pick, which they do have, but Max obviously doesn't care about that when he wants to play at the end of the year. So how do they mend this is a big part of what's going on. The other part is what I mentioned with Clint Kubiak, who is speaking to the media right now, is that he hasn't really had that time to start a relationship with Maxx Crosby, with coaching in the Super Bowl, and now just arriving today, and will be in the parade tomorrow and then back on the job on Thursday, to where what part of role does Clint Kubiak, the new defensive coordinator, play in this? Well, they're not a part of what Maxx Crosby is frustrated with, so that's really not their problem, so they can come in and help that in some instance. Now, if Maxx Crosby is officially done, and what I was always told, and I think I've said this on multiple streams on here, guys, is he was always going to depart the Raiders when Max was ready to depart the Raiders. That always was what I was told in the past. They want him to be a Raider. Mark Davis wants him to be a Raider. But when Max finally says, you know what, I think it's time for me to play elsewhere. I'm about to be 29 years old. I'm still in my prime. I've been through all these rebuilds. I think it's time. I think that's when the conversation somewhat changes. And I do think this new ownership group probably has a little bit of a different vision in what they see for Maxx Crosby and what they see for rebuilding a roster that has a lot of different holes on it. So where they stand right now is Maxx Crosby has a lot of leverage if he does officially want to come out and say, or say it privately, which seems to be probably more likely the case, that he would like to play elsewhere. He holds a lot of the cards. He hasn't officially asked for a trade, to my understanding. His contract is very tradable. But he also could say, I don't want to be here, and that be very private, and people within the organization know that. And is that the culture you want to start out with in the Clint Kubiak era, when the main cog and the best player on your roster does not want to be there anymore, and you're forcing him to be there. So I do think all of this is in play. The package that would come for Maxx would be similar to my understanding of Maxx Crosby. I heard Jay Glazer say it would be more than Micah Parsons. I heard Jay Glazer say that it would be more than Micah Parsons. The reason that you could think that, even though the age is different and the versatility is different, Maxx does check every single box in terms of a cultural guy, in terms of a locker room guy. There were some questions about that. I know that Mike has been outstanding in Green Bay, but there were some questions there. So where do you go now if they do end up moving him? One part I would say, and this is why I mentioned at the top, the relationship that Mark Davis has with Maxx Crosby. Does Mark want to do right by one of his favorite players of all time when the two sides do part, and they will get a lucrative package no matter what? Would he want to send him to a place that Maxx would like to play? Obviously, a contender is where it's at with so much time he's played in the NFL with not really getting to the postseason or contending for championships. I'm kind of curious about that. There's going to be a lot of teams that are interested. If you don't have two-star edge rushers, you should be interested in Maxx Crosby. Look for contenders. That's the first place I would start. Oftentimes, edge rushers are a lot like closers in baseball. You add them in a move like this when you believe you are right at the pinnacle of being a true Super Bowl contender in this type of player. A closer late in games, specifically in the postseason, can be the added piece to get you over the hump. That's what the Packers thought. They thought they were a Super Bowl roster, and they look like a Super Bowl team, honestly, before Micah Parsons goes down. They thought adding him to that defense is what pushes you over the hump. So look at contenders potentially being that. Is that the Bills, who's looked at multiple edge rushers to be that? They looked at Von Miller. They looked at Joey Bosa. They brought in these guys, much cheaper, obviously, but it's now Brandon Beane pull the trigger when they feel like they're in the Super Bowl window with Joe Brady and Josh Allen. I would look at teams like the Lions, where he's from Detroit. Do they need somebody opposite of Aiden Hutchinson? There's a lot of big decisions coming up in Detroit right now, and how do they manage the situation that they're in when the defense has let them down, when they've had such a really, really good offense over a number of years? Like the 49ers, the Cowboys, who are so good on the interior but lack pass rushing on the outside. The Ravens, I think the Eagles would always still be looking because they made a swing at Micah Parsons. So I think you look at all of these contenders. I would specifically possibly look at the Patriots as well, who got right up there to the Super Bowl, have an outstanding interior rush with Milton Williams, and lack exterior edge rush. I would look at all of these teams as potential landing spots for Maxx Crosby. What the Raiders would hope for is that there's multiple teams that are willing, and obviously there should be, looking for Maxx Crosby services to drive up the price as they have multiple holes on their roster. I'm not going to push Maxx Crosby out of Vegas just yet. There's a lot of reports out there that he has told Tom Brady or people close to Tom Brady that he's not, ever going to play for the Raiders ever again. He'd rather retire. We heard a lot of the same from Myles Garrett last year, when he was going up and down Radio Row saying he never returned to the Browns, and he returned to the Browns. So nothing is out of the picture, but I do think this is the first time we've ever really, really been looking at Maxx Crosby landing elsewhere for the first time in a very serious fashion. So it is a little bit different in that sense. Okay, I got Bears on here. I got Rams on here. Oh, Rams defensive line already quite there. I would say that Spytek and Like have a relationship being overlooked. Yeah, that's, you're talking about in Tampa Bay. Okay. No mention of the Bears. I wouldn't put it past the Bears. Would you like a running mate opposite of Sweat? I think that's definitely decent. I think you always look for teams that are also operating with a rookie quarterback contract. That's why I mentioned the Patriots. Hell, the Bears could be in that group, I think. We got here on the Eagles, we got Jags. I think the Jags are, with James Gladstone, by the way, always a team looking to make a splash. I just think there's a lot of teams that are going to be interested. But I do want to say this, and the reason that we can't say, bro didn't say Chicago, laugh my ass off. Okay, whatever. Listen, this is what you have to think about. He has a meniscus tear that was repaired, not a trim. So now the length of his recovery is much longer. We have a lot of time most likely to discuss this because nothing is going to happen anytime soon because of the recovery and the health. Very rarely will you ever see a player traded before they are somewhat healthy or further along in their rehab process. So I think that part plays a factor in this as well when you're looking to a trade for a player that's of that. Just obviously you're going to trust your medical staff, but there's a lot of things at play here in about Maxx Crosby and where things stand. All right, let's get to our next one here, which is where the Super Bowl fallout is and the adjustments that the Seattle Seahawks are going to have to make after winning Super Bowl 60. This happens to every team that wins the Super Bowl. You have a number of free agents. Everybody believes they should get paid. Everybody believes that they should get paid now that they helped you win a Super Bowl, and there's a lot of things you have to go through. This led us to our co-pilot question. So I asked co-pilot after the Seahawks, I asked co-pilot, which team this year have the most free agents? And here's what we found out. Tied for first, the Commanders and the Jets have 33 unrestricted free agents. The Giants are third with 21 unrestricted free agents. The team with the most key free agents, according to Copilot, were the Packers and the Seahawks. And that's why we're getting into the Seahawks right now. Obviously, it's Kenneth Walker, it's Boye Mafe, it's Job, it's Kobe Bryant, it's Rashid Shaheed, it's Reek Woolen. There's a lot of different names on that list. I think that they'd like to bring back Kenneth Walker. I think Kenneth Walker would like to come back after winning Super Bowl MVP, and you have teams like, say, the Chiefs or the Broncos or other teams like that that are going, if we have a run game added to what we're doing, we definitely would be in a much different spot than we have been in the last couple of seasons. It's going to be interesting, and this is why I wanted to talk about this. John Schneider operates unlike very many general managers out there. He's extremely aggressive. He's extremely forward-thinking. He moves on from players that you wouldn't expect him to move on from or when you wouldn't expect him to move on from. He moved on from Russell Wilson sooner than a lot of people admitted. He moved on from Geno Smith when he wanted to bring in Sam Darnold because they came at an impasse of contract negotiations. He thought outside the box and said Jackson Smith and Jigba is more than just an inside receiver. He's an outside guy that can be a number one. I'm moving on from DK Metcalf and I'm moving on from Tyler Lockett, and it worked. He wins Offensive Player of the Year. He finds ways to make these moves. He pivoted when he went and got Mike McDonald as the head coach. So he looks at things a little bit differently. I do think these free agents are ones we should be talking about, and obviously they're going to go through all of that. What I think needs to be mentioned first in the way that he operates is they first need to find a new offensive coordinator with Clint Kubiak departing and look for somebody that works in a very similar fashion. The fit that Sam Darnold had with Clint Kubiak's system is going to weigh very heavily, to my understanding, in how they want to move forward with Sam, making him very comfortable, operating under center, the play action, the bootlegs, all of those different things. Keep an eye on some familiarity there. But that's priority one. Priority two, honestly, before some of these free agents, is figuring out your salary cap situation, which is very good because they have a lot of good players on rookie contracts and have made very smart moves within the trades that they've made. And by the way, he's done that in the middle of the season. When you look at Leonard Williams, Rashid Shaheed, and Ernest Jones, those all came in the middle of the season. Like, this is one of the best general managers in recent memory in football, the way he operates. But he also has two massive contracts that he is going to be trying to figure out. And that is Jackson Smith and Jigba, and that is Devin Witherspoon. His two first-round picks from 2023 are due for extensions now, and now that's when you have to start doing some roster movement and be very creative with it. Oftentimes, you get to a pinnacle, and then certain players get paid, like these guys that are on the rookie deals, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is obviously going to be asking to be paid like one of the highest receivers in all of football, and rightfully so. Devin Witherspoon is going to be asked to probably want to be paid like one of the highest cornerbacks in football, and rightfully so. He could have very well been the MVP of the Super Bowl. So he has to figure out those contracts before he can figure out all of these other free agent spots. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if some sort of renegotiation with Sam Darnold and his contract, which essentially could have been torn up after a year, will be renegotiated as well. So John Schneider has a lot of big to get to, from his quarterback to his two-star players to his offensive coordinator, before he gets to all these other free agents. But teams love to poke free agents from Super Bowl winning teams. It changes a culture. They've been through it. They just won it. It helps you. So it will be interesting to see what happens with those. But he has a lot bigger things to do before those free agents. All right, what do we got? Have to pay Detroit running back Gibbs. I think we're going to be fascinated, by the way, with Jahmyr Gibbs' contract. This is the next Christian McCaffrey weapon, essentially. I think obviously Bijan's right there as well. But the home run explosion ability with the ball in his hands from anywhere on the field, this is going to be a fascinating contract when I talk to people around the league about really what it's going to be like. For that contract and the difficult decisions Detroit is now going to have to make. This happens when you draft well. I'll have to say that. Is Isaac Tekla, if Isaac Tekla is part of a package, I don't think it would cost too much. Okay, well, Detroit may have many players to pay. Yep, mentioned that. He said Detroit himself, if he could choose a spot, he'd want to be in Alliance. That's got to be home, right? He's from Michigan. Why wouldn't he want to go there? I also thought that Aiden Hutchinson needs help. I mean, certainly needs help for sure. Crosby's trade return will be great for Clint Kubiak's success. I think this is a roster that has a lot of holes on it for sure. What else do we got on here? Buffalo Bills bound. Do you feel like the Broncos will make any big moves this offseason? I would look at the tight end spot, and do they want to revamp their receiver room a little bit as something I kind of have my eye on. Crosby to my Seahawks, and we repeat. They have a lot of talent on that front right there. Any news on Javonte Williams? I know that Dallas really, really wants him back. I would be surprised if that didn't happen, but we'll see what ends up happening. Do Pats trade for A.J. Brown or Max? I talked to somebody in the league about A.J. Brown to the Patriots the other day, and I thought that was kind of fun, kind of interesting. I do think that the Patriots need like a surefire number one and a gotta have it moment. Who does Drake may go to? I think down the field, the most trust Drake has is going to Kayshon Boutte, really. I think that's where he feels the most trust because they don't really have a number one. But I also know that Mike Vrabel and company in Nashville parted ways with A.J. Brown, even though it was a little bit reluctant to some, because there were concerns of a knee issue that A.J. Brown had. And now it's 4 more years playing football on that knee. Does Mike Vrabel want to take that risk, even though he likes A.J. Brown a lot, and bring him back after those were original concerns and part of the reason why they were willing to trade him? I think that part sneaks into my head a little bit. And I'm interested to see what they do with the receiver room there because they are built off of having just a variety of guys and being able to go anywhere at any given time. Having balls forced to a certain individual may not be the way they really want to do it, but I think they do need a number one. I think picking the right guy is a really, really important move for it. Watch out, Howie Roseman. How he get moving, you never know. All right, Kirk Cousins, some possible landing spots for Captain Kirk. I think, we knew that they were going to part ways in Atlanta with Kirk Cousins when you saw the adjustment to his contract last month. That was essentially telling us that they are going to release Kirk Cousins. What I am interested in seeing now is that Kevin Stefanski is the head coach in Atlanta. Does he return with Michael Penix coming off of the ACL? And maybe he can play for a period of time, and maybe Kirk Cousins thinks that he can hold off Michael Penix for the duration of the season if he goes out there and plays well. The reason I'm bringing this up is you have to remember the Browns, and I remember being told this by multiple league sources, were interested in training for Kirk Cousins last season, or I think it was last offseason before the season. And the price was too high, and the asking price was too high. Who was the head coach with the Browns? Kevin Stefanski. So there is some familiarity there. Cousins has really liked Atlanta. His family's really liked Atlanta. I wouldn't rule out returning back to Atlanta in some fashion. I know Minnesota's the other one that we keep talking about because they want to pair a veteran quarterback there with J.J. McCarthy. I wouldn't rule that out either, as well as maybe him landing at a couple of other spots. I would say this just talking to some coaches around the league this morning. There are some people that think that, yes, he has a viable chance to land somewhere and has some success in 2026. There are certainly some other coaches I've talked to that said, no, he is not a viable starter anymore. I would go elsewhere. The problem is there's just not a lot of different options there. And we'll get through the entire quarterback kind of landscape. But that's where it stands for Kirk Cousins. The league is kind of split in whether they think he can play in 2026 or whether they don't think he can play. I think he'll be on a roster. Whether he's a viable starter for you for the season, I don't know if everybody's universally agreement on that by any stretch. But he does have probably a couple of landing spots. I wanted to mention this because I do believe there's a chance he could go back to Atlanta. All right. What else do we have here? Back to Vikings for Kirk. Yep, just mentioned that. AJ does look like he's slowing downfield. There are some people I've talked to that do believe that AJ is at his peak right now. And so we'll see exactly where it's at. Would the Texans start CJ Stroud extension talks this summer? They certainly can. I think it's going to be a fascinating summer right now in Houston. I think they want to lock up Will Anderson, who is obviously the same draft. They're picked right next to each other. Want to get him locked up as quickly as possible. Same thing they did with Derek Stingley. I think CJ is more complicated. I mean, I had this conversation with Kurt Warner the other day, actually. We were texting back and forth going like, what is wrong with CJ? And a Hall of Fame quarterback like Kurt Warner is like, I can't put my finger on it. I've never seen a guy play, and he really thought rookie season CJ Stroud was a top 5 quarterback. Kurt told me that. He said now he's gone to just bad. And he was like, I've never seen a player go from that good to bad. He's like, I've seen guys like Cam Newton or Matt Ryan have an outstanding season, then go back to just being good quarterbacks or relatively very good quarterbacks. This fall has been very interesting with CJ Stroud. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this entire offseason plays, because I do think Houston's going to get some calls and just go, what are you guys thinking on CJ Stroud? I think it's going to be very, very fascinating to watch what happens with him. All right. He needs a great offense. Oh, Kirk to the booth. I actually don't think he'd be terrible at it. You've seen him do some work there. He needs a great offensive line. I think that's about, I don't know who that's for. Maybe that's about, offensive line is about CJ Stroud. That has been a major issue there, but some of the not trusting himself has been the things I've heard out of Houston, and getting down on himself when things go bad is something that they've definitely talked about. All right, Kyler Murray. What is happening with Kyler Murray? They have a head coach now. They have Mike LaFleur in place there, and I still think the greater chance is for him to be on the move. Do I think the chances increased a little bit over the last week or so that he may stay? Possibly. But I do think the greater chance is still that he's on the move. They would like to trade him as opposed to release him. First off, because of that, I have it in front of me. They trade him, creates $34.7 million in cap savings. They just have $17.9 million in dead money. If they release him, they have $54.7 million in dead money. They can make it a post-June 1, and then that's split between 2 years, that $54 million. He's an enigma of a player. As I've talked to some people about Kyler, and it was really this. The talent is all there. There's stretches where he plays like a top 7, top 9 quarterback in this league. Playing that way consistently has been his problem for the duration of his career. He has great athleticism. He has the ability to be a playmaker. He has unbelievable accuracy at times. It's just making that consistent. I think somebody may be creative and look at what happened with Sam Darnold these last 2 years and go, can we have our own reclamation project? Because there are teams that are going to be looking for quarterbacks. I think right now it's a little early for what those teams would be. I think everybody's still evaluating where this draft is at. I think that plays a part. I texted an offensive coordinator this morning who was like, I think this quarterback class is trash. That's his words, not mine. It might be Fernando Mendoza to the Raiders at 1, and then everybody else who needs a quarterback is out there really looking. What I do think also is part of this, and I've been told this by people around the league, he has a very specific way in which he plays. It's kind of like a very feel for the game, freelance style. I'm not even sure if that fits Marvin Harrison, who's just a distinct route runner and wants the ball on time after a 5-step drop or a 7-step drop. And so it's going to be interesting to see where he goes because he's still just 28 years old. He's still in his prime. Texting people this morning, it was, yes, I certainly still think he can play. I think Tua can play, is what I also got back. But at the same time, Kyler doesn't have the same injury history that Tua has. Could be one hit and he's done. So these two guys are going to be very, very interesting to watch. Who takes the chance on a reclamation project and who also is banking on 2027? I think when you look at the teams that are looking for quarterbacks, kind of assembled this list here, essentially with the Dolphins, the Jets, the Steelers, the Browns, the Raiders, the Vikings, the Saints, the Cardinals, the Falcons. Then, like in this chat here, we're kind of mentioning here, like, what's up with CJ Stroud? What's up with the future of Bryce Young? What's up with the future of Baker Mayfield? Those are all contract discussions. I think Baker obviously staying in Tampa, and I know that new offensive staff, I know really, really well, is excited to work with Baker. But when I look at all of these teams, the Jets really look like they have their eye on 2027. Are they looking for a rental of some sort of process? You know that Malik Willis is going to play a factor in this, and he's a free agent, and he's going to land one of these spots. I think the Saints are most likely going to stick with Tyler Shough as their quarterback this year. I think the Vikings add a vet. I think the Cardinals, if Murray stays, then they're out of this list, and that also takes one of the quarterbacks off this list. I think you look at the Steelers, they're still going to sit there and wait for Aaron Rodgers, or are they going to go after somebody else? I just think the Dolphins right there, do they play Quinn Ewers, who played well at the end of the year, for Bobby Slowick as part of that offensive staff, who's now their offensive coordinator, or do they try to move Tua and then move another quarterback? I just think there's not a lot of landing spots for some of these guys because some of these places are kind of up in the air, but they're not. The Browns, you look at Shedeur Sanders. There's a lot of people that think that he is going to get the start in 2026 because of the way the draft slots, and they could be looking at a quarterback in 27 and give Shedeur the chance in 26 to grow. So I think when you look at Kyler and you look at Tua, I'm fascinated to see if somebody jumps at the chance to trade for one of them, and will the Cardinals or the Dolphins eat some of that money? I do think that's definitely a very viable option with this. Bryce started to show great signs at the end of the year. I agree. I think there's some things that Bryce has done that has shown the growth that he's had. I believe him and Josh Allen are the only players in each of their first 3 seasons. And they've gone up in their completion percentage, winning percentage, touchdown interception ratio, I believe. All of them have gone up. And so Bryce has gone in a certain trajectory for sure. And I think you've seen him with the number of comebacks. I think since he's been the starter, he's had more comeback wins than any other quarterback in football, I believe, 12. So I do think Bryce has shown some interesting things. What's the future of Michael Pittman Jr.? That's an interesting one. I think Alec Pierce there on that team is the one that everybody's kind of looking at. We're going to break him down on my 89 show with Steve Smith Sr. as we talk about all these free agent wide receivers, and we'll see. I see what happens in Indy. I would say the quarterback is certainly staying, though. No smaller person would want to trade for that contract with Kyler. It's not unreal, the contract, honestly. It really isn't. The Tua situation contract wise is much worse than the Kyler situation in terms of the contract. All right, Russell Wilson. Hey yo, he still wants to play football. At 37, and that's cool. Russ can continue to go play football. I actually I like Russ quite a bit. But again, I think this is a spot to where he's most likely going to have to wait. This could be something that happens in training camp. I do think Jackson Dart liked him in the room, and so maybe he's shifting more into that backup spot. We have to remember what's happened the last 2 years. He goes and signs the 1-year deal with the Steelers. Mike Tomlin kind of promises him that he's going to be the starter. Justin Fields plays great. Justin Fields probably shouldn't be benched. If you ask anybody in that building, he gets benched. Russ plays okay. Season ends. Arthur Smith has his pick about which one he wants to bring back. He would have preferred to bring back Justin Fields. Then he goes to the Giants. He's a starter for a handful of games. Jackson Dart becomes a starter. He actually gets demoted from the backup to the third string. I'm just laying out what's happened in each of the last 2 years and where things stand for Russell Wilson and the options that other teams have. There was always a thought sometimes that he was a bit of a distraction to be your backup quarterback. I don't think that's the case anymore. I want to throw another name in there while I'm talking about Russell Wilson, though, that makes this quarterback carousel in this offseason and a couple of the teams that are looking for guys more interesting. I do think Derek Carr can still play. Texting with those same guys this morning, that they do believe that Derek Carr can still play. Now, the rights are owned by the, let's see here. I got a little quote here. Let's get this here. Quote on Maxx Crosby. We want him to be a part of our success going forward. There's no doubt about that. That is Clint Kubiak on Maxx Crosby during his press conference right now. So that's the new head coach. Wants him to be there in Vegas. Obviously, TBD on what Maxx Crosby's future is, but told you that Clint Kubiak was talking right now. Wanted to throw that out there. But Derek Carr is another potential arm that could be thrown into this group. Now, things ended very amicably between the Saints and Derek Carr. There could be very low draft compensation for him, but I'm just bringing up Derek Carr when I have this topic going. There's a couple of different moving pieces here about how this musical chairs game is going to work with these quarterbacks, and Derek Carr could be another name thrown in there that allows somebody else to maybe not have a seat. And then there's the other wrinkle. Even though San Francisco has been very firm in saying that they will not trade Mac Jones, it is not going to stop teams, from my understanding, from calling San Francisco. This is a guy that is under a 2-year contract for $8.4 million. So he's under contract for $4.67 million in cash in 2026. That is an unbelievably reasonable backup quarterback when you look at what the Texans re-upped with Davis Mills for $7 million this past fall. Teams are going to call. I think they do value Mac Jones quite a bit, specifically with Brock Purdy missing some time and them being able to continue to win football games and get into the postseason and win a game. I think they do value Mac Jones. What if an offer is more than what they were expecting to get for Mac, and he ends up landing one of these spots as a stopgap quarterback? Then again, that throws this whole group for a loop a bit. So it is fascinating to see what ends up happening with all of these individuals. All right, let's get to this chat a little bit. What's the word on the Steelers QB situation? It's starting to seem a little bit like Dart needs to learn to slide. Yeah, I think Dart needs to learn a lot of things. I brought this up the other day on my show on The Athletic, talking about I think it's interesting that Matt Nagy is landing with Jackson Dart, because one of the things that they did with Patrick Mahomes was that whole staff was always giving Mahomes a lot of liberty to go out there and play very freely and create with his legs and make plays off script and put himself out there, because they always knew he was going to protect himself. And we've seen that for the vast majority of his career, right outside of the dislocated kneecap on the QB sneak that they just stopped running. Going out there in space, he always has been fine up until this last one here. So they always trusted him to protect himself. That's a different conversation now with Matt Nagy and Jackson Dart, to where going to protect yourself, like, we need to make sure the quarterback does that. And I think they put a lot of experience on that offensive side of the ball, honestly, with the coaching staff that they're putting together to make sure that he doesn't go out there and do that. Anyway, and what we were mentioning right before that, the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh, they may be waiting for Aaron Rodgers again. I do know that Mike McCarthy really, really liked Will Howard. Again, I'm not saying Will Howard is the answer. I'm just putting the facts out there. I'm not sure what Pittsburgh's going to do. I think Aaron Rodgers returning is certainly a possibility for sure, but they need to look long-term quarterback-wise, and I don't think they have a plan for that as of right now. What's going to happen with Watson in Cleveland? I found this interesting, because if you really do think about it, Deshaun Watson probably is the most talented quarterback on the Browns roster. And I'm not speaking out of turn. If you look at his last year, obviously the last couple of years have gone terrible. If you look at his last year before he was traded, I mean, he's proven at the NFL level he can be one of the best quarterbacks in football. That last year in Houston, if you look at the stats, are just unbelievable off of a terrible team. Like completed like 70% of his passes and led the NFL in passing. He has this last year. Myles Garrett actually went on Radio Row actually and said, I think they both have a chance to start Shedeur Sanders or Deshaun Watson. The contract is up after this year. It's weird that he's still there when their owner continuously says publicly, this was one of the biggest mistakes we've ever made, and the guy is still on your roster. I find that kind of like fascinating, but we'll see. Right now, it looks more likely like Shedeur than Deshaun, but coming off of an Achilles and then a re-rupture of that Achilles, we'll just keep an eye on it for right now. If Carr unretires, the Jets make sense. The Jets are definitely a team that could be looking for a stopgap type of situation when they have all these picks in 2027. Now, you have to remember, the Jets strategically, I was told, wanted some of the picks in the trades that they made to be in 27, not 26 in terms of the first round. I think they understand the group of quarterbacks that are coming out in 27 compared to the group of quarterbacks that were coming out in this draft. So who do they have for this year? Derek Carr would actually make some sense. I think the stopgap type of quarterback would be exactly what they're kind of looking at. With Kyle Pitts, a free agent, who do you think his market looks like and what team that fits? Man, he's a fascinating player. The amount of talent, the amount of athletic ability, you see flashes that's outstanding. You also know, or at least I know, that coaching staff in Atlanta was very frustrated with him at times. I do think that somebody's going to take a chance because of the ceiling that Kyle Pitts has. There's a number of free agents that are going to be available. Not saying they're all the same, but Dallas Goedert's going to be a free agent. David Njoku says he's going to play elsewhere. You got Kyle Pitts as well. I think there are teams, like I think Denver could be looking for a potential addition to their tight end room. I just think that the player that he is viewed very differently across the league, if that makes sense. There's times where you look at him and certain teams are wowed by him, and there's other teams that do not really see him win consistently unless it's schemed perfectly for him. Fascinating player to look at. The Titans have more money than you could imagine. The Titans' plans essentially are this. Figure out what type of core you want to build around. I think they like a couple of their young wide receivers from talking to people there. Obviously, the development of Cam Ward in year 2 with Brian Daboll is pretty much a major priority. I think getting to respectability is a big part of this, and I think that's why you look at the coordinators that they have there, and you have 3 guys in Gus Bradley and John Fossil and Brian Daboll who have all called plays and have all been a head coach. I think that's not by accident. I think they need to figure out a way to evaluate talent better and to be more competitive on Sunday in terms of miscues, and I think Saleh had some issues with that. I don't think that's going to be the case moving forward. Does it make sense for us to keep Tua? I don't know if I'm the one making too big of a deal about this, but it's a very difficult with what he's done to that locker room multiple times this season to go back into that locker room. I think that's just a very difficult situation. I think the Dolphins would like to move on from him. Would they like a trade and possibly eat some of that money to get a trade done? I think they would do that. Talking to people this morning, just asking some offensive coaches, they believe Tua certainly can play. Now, another offensive coach did tell me he does play in a very specific manner, and Mike McDaniel had needed to change a lot for what he was doing offensively to protect Tua and protect the head and protect how he plays. And so I do think he can be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think the Dolphins would like somebody to come approach them to have that happen elsewhere. Pitts to Tennessee, interesting one there. Atlanta would be smart to put tag on Pitts and then as opposed to lose him for nothing. See, what wide receivers should the Chargers target? I think this is an interesting wide receiver group for 2 reasons. One, there's some interesting free agents that are going to be out there. I don't know if I see the Chargers going that way. Where I see the Chargers going is in a draft that a lot of people believe, and this is going to be a big part of my offseason, specifically at this position with my show with Steve Smith that we do, which is mostly receiver-based. He's telling me that like in his scouting right now, there are a lot of receivers in terms of the depth of this draft. I'm not saying it's high-end talent at the top, but there's depth there as well. And so I do think you can go out there in this draft and find an added piece to your receiver room as well. But I like the way the Chargers are built, man. I like the, you got a young tight end, you got two young receivers. We'll see what Keenan Allen's future is, but I do think they could add to that room. But I think the draft would be the interesting part of it. Do you think there's a market for Jawan Jennings? I do. I do think there's a good chance he returns. He's the type of player that a lot of teams love. He will rip guys' faces off out there. I mean, he is competitive as he can be. It'll be interesting to see where he lands, but I do think there is a thought right now that he goes back to San Francisco if you talk to people around the league. What do you know about the new Eagles offensive coaching staff, and what's your outlook for them? I think Sean Mannion is a very, very bright young offensive play caller. I had heard early in the process that if they did go with a young play caller like Mannion, they were going to bring somebody else in. Now enter Gazard, who comes in from Tampa Bay, who was a previous play caller there. I know their new offensive line coach pretty well. He's been in a couple of really good stops, and we know that he was obviously just in Minnesota. I knew him from Denver. I think they're going to let Mannion kind of have a change in how the philosophy of this is going to be run. It's going to be run more of that Shanahan and McVay type of style. And I think what we're going to need to find out is if Jalen Hurts wants to be an individual at the quarterback position that wants to use his legs or not. I think that's what we're trying to figure out, and that's what we're going to try to see in terms of how this offense goes. But I think more under center, more of the boots, stuff like that could be at play. And how does that mesh with Jalen Hurts? That's what we're looking to find out. But I do think this is an opportunity now where Nick Sirianni is going to give the offense coordinator a little more leeway to run things the way that they want. Homie just said, Homie Clint, I like that. Homie Clint just said Maxx is part of the Raiders' future. Yep, I just read the quote on there too. We'll see what ends up happening, TBD. Again, if Maxx doesn't want to play anymore for the Raiders, that changes things. I think Clint's saying all the right things. I'm not sure you come out in your opening press conference and say, we want to get rid of the best player on our roster. Extension news for Lamar. I think that's certainly going to happen. I don't think they're going to trade Lamar, but I think it's going to be a very interesting contract negotiation for sure. It always is with Lamar. He doesn't have an agent. Him and his mom do it. It's always just, it's just different, let's just be honest, than what happens in these other buildings. But I do think something most likely, never say never, would probably get done. I'm late to the conversation. Do you think Dallas has a good chance to land Crosby? They're the type of team that would take the swing, I would think. But they have a lot of moving parts in what's going on right now. But I do think Christian Parker is an outstanding hire at that spot, at their defensive coordinator spot. I will say that to you. With Minnesota going on in GM, how will KOC and Flores attack the draft? I think that's an... Man, it's just such an interesting draft for Minnesota. And where they're at, they need to reload big time, man. They went out and got a lot of older players. They need to reload within this draft. It's going to be interesting to see where they go. I think they need some weapons, honestly. Obviously, Justin Jefferson's still there, but I think you need some other help there. And yeah, there's stuff that needs to happen. There we go. Raiders head coach Clint Kubiak. We want him to be a part of our success going forward. No doubt about that. Okay, boom. I would want the best players in football to be part of my future as well. Okay, I think I got to wrap this bad boy up here. We've been going here for a minute. Does Minnesota's coaching staff still believe in the young quarterback? I think they have to. It was their pick. But I think TBD on a lot of things that need to be adjusted in this offseason, whether it's his base, whether it's the way he throws, whether it's his mechanics. I trust Kevin O'Connell to go and try to make some of those adjustments, but I think that they're looking to add a veteran. I think they're looking to hedge their bets a little bit, and there's a lot of buyer remorse after Sam Darnold just won a Super Bowl. All right, everybody, appreciate it. Don't forget, we will be back again next Tuesday. We will be on 2 o'clock Eastern doing this again, and love the interaction. Love everybody going, jumping on here and getting into the stream. Love it. I enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys all next week. Take it easy.